Hey everyone, this is Gary Smith. Welcome to my channel where I talk about the importance of purpose as it relates to your career, your finances, and your life. Today I'm speaking with none other than Patricia Morgan, who owns a company called Solutions for Resilience. And Patricia refers to herself as the spunky seniorpreneur. We're going to have a great conversation today, but the topic for today's conversation is leadership stress. So stay tuned. Many of you will really want to dig into this with us. Hey everyone, welcome to today's podcast. I am thrilled to be able to have with me Patricia Morgan. Patricia, it's really interesting because one of the things that I absolutely love about you, Patricia, is you call yourself the spunky seniorpreneur, which is just amazing. But Patricia is from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and she owns a company called Solutions for Resilience. And she deals with so many topics because she's an author, a speaker, and a therapist. But she talks about things like communication skills, emotional insight, family dynamics, personal resilience, positive psychology, the whole gamut of things. And today we're going to be talking about leadership stress, which I think is a very timely topic in the world that we live in. In fact, just before we hit the record button, Patricia and I were talking about some of the sad things that are going on in the world that are contributing to all of this stress. But before we jump into the conversation, just want to welcome you, Patricia, and say it's so wonderful, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be with me today.
My pleasure.
So let's jump in because it seems like in the past, I mean, stress has always been with us as leaders. I mean, we've never lived in a stress-free environment, but it seems like in the past, we've at least gotten some respite between things, because I think back to as an example, 9/11. When 9/11 happened, there was a great deal of stress around the world as a result of that. But then, things sort of progressed after that, and we got back to a state of normalcy. And then we had the 2008, 2009 crisis where the credit markets and the stock market and the real estate market crashed. And that was a little bit, but it seems to me that really starting with the pandemic a few years ago, that we have started to stack stuff up, and it's becoming more and more and faster and closer together. And so as leaders, it really is hard sometimes to deal with the stress. And one of the things that I think about, and one of the things that I deal with my clients, is that especially when we get in times of crisis, people are coming to leaders and they're looking to us for certainty. They want to know what's happening next and what are we doing about it, and how are we going to get through this. And so much of the time, especially since the pandemic, as leaders, we're looking at them and saying, we can't give you certainty because we don't know any more than you do what's going to happen tomorrow. All we can do at this point is try to give you clarity. And by clarity, I mean, based on what we know right now, here's what we're going to do. But we're also going to keep our ear to the railroad track and hear what's going on. And as we get more information, we'll make better decisions. But it seems to me that so many of the leaders in business and in politics are not only, they're not only not saying, hey, we don't know. What they're trying to do is literally pull stuff out of their butts to be able to communicate to people, and most of the stuff that they're coming up with isn't true anyway. And so that creates another layer of stress. But, with that sort of as the stage, talk to us a little bit about the whole concept of leadership stress, and let's get into a dialogue about how we go about coping with stress. How do we bleed the stress off? How do we use the stress in positive ways? Because I see a lot of people who are just beside themselves and they don't know what to do anymore.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. So yes, the speed of change is increasing. And one thing that we can count on is change. For every change that happens, it requires us to adjust. And then we have to demonstrate flexibility. And oftentimes we don't know. And yes, people are looking for an anchor. They're looking for some stability. As a leader, one of the aspects that you can provide as stability is I'm here for you. My door is open. My ears are available to you. This isn't easy. And for every change, we end up having to think, oh my goodness, do we have to manage the change cycle? So there's the change happens. We need to accept it, or do we not? And then we have to make adjustments, and then we go into the flow. And then another change happens. And during COVID, of course, there were all these different protocols. One day we were supposed to do one thing, and the next day we had something else we were supposed to do. And to keep up with all of the changes was exhausting. So even happy changes are exhausting. Consider somebody getting married. Oh, it's a happy time, but it can be also quite stressful, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I laugh at the young couple that are going to have the baby, and they're so excited to have the baby, and that's a good thing, but they have no idea how sleep deprived they're going to be, how their relationship is going to have a lot of stress in it. And I had a young woman in my life, that silly young woman whose marriage wasn't doing very well, and he thought she was on birth control, and she thought she would improve the relationship by having a baby.
Oh boy.
Oh no. Babies are delightful, but big mess of stress. And I felt my heart went out to so many of the young families who were required to work from home during COVID with little ones under their feet. Very, very challenging. Work from home, and then no, you got to come back to the office. So it's really important for leaders to understand that there are some people that are slow to change. Doesn't matter what the change is, but they are slow to adapt. Then there are the moderates that, it looks like this is the way it's going to be. And then there are the early adapters, sometimes the initiators of the change, right? So to know the difference between people, the ones that are going to adapt quickly, the ones that are going to go slow, and the other ones who are actually not even going to adapt, for example. And you may have to deal with that. So I've had times where I did not adapt. My husband at one time ended up buying a house when we had a work transfer. And I never adapted to it. He said, where are you going the first Saturday that we moved in? I said, I'm going to go look for the home I want to live in. I never adapted to that house. It was a big mistake he made. I said I didn't like it. And he said, oh, you will adapt. And he said, I want in the housing market. And I said, well, you buy it, but I want the caveat that if I'm not happy, I will look elsewhere. So that's one consideration for leaders to take into consideration. A second piece that might be useful is about our language. Instead of calling it stressful or stress, is to call it a challenge. So think about a rubber band. A rubber band is something that is very useful, but if we just leave it in our drawer, it's not very useful. We want to have some stress, some stretch. That proves it's useful, right? But if it gets stretched too much, then we call that distress. So Hans Selye, who is the founder of the Canadian Stress Institute, he coined two words to describe stress. One is called eustress, which means healthy stretch. So Gary, have you ever been in a job that was boring, didn't inspire you?
Oh,
you
absolutely.
Could have packed through the day. Yeah. And you longed for some challenge.
Right.
Right. A little bit of stretch. But then I bet you've had other jobs where they wanted to stretch you, pressure you to just too far, right?
Yeah, you get to a point where that's where burnout begins to occur.
You got it. Snap, crack, break, burnout. So we need to know where that for ourselves, and if as a leader, different people have a different capacity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I can ask somebody if they'll stay late, but maybe the single parent mom with 4 kids who's just getting through the day, you might not ask her to do an extra, right? You want to take people's capacity, and burnout and distress related illnesses cost billions of dollars to organizations.
Oh, absolutely. Not
Right.
only billions of dollars from the standpoint of the health issues that it creates, but the
Yes.
loss of productivity and the loss of engagement with the organization.
Right. Right. So knowing people's capacity is really, really important around that. And so when people say, that's not good for me to do, or maybe I'm not the best person to do that task, listen to them, believe them. So, which brings up another point. We can minimize distress for people if they are placed in roles that build on their strengths. Strengths put us in the zone. They energize us. If we have to do tasks that are not in our strength base, it will deplete us. So good hiring, slow to hire and fast to fire, if it's not a good fit, is a good policy too for keeping people in good spaces, and building on those strengths is a very good practice. And of course, there's lots of literature out there for leaders on how to do that based on Marcus Buckingham's work, Go Find Your Strengths, Go Use Your Strengths, Martin Seligman's book on Flourish, and he also has a strengths inventory that people can take.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So burnout basically is a workplace term. It's sometimes a caregiver term as well. And it means that pressure to perform is beyond capacity. And signs of burnout is an employee's behavior that changes. They start grumbling more. You'll see cynicism. You'll see complaints. You'll see lack of light in their eyes. Smiles will disappear. Perhaps argumentative. So you want to pay attention to a sort of a dimming of energy and enthusiasm for the workplace.
Yeah, I know there's so much in what you've just said in these few minutes. So let's unpack some of this stuff, because as a leader, I really agree with what Simon Sinek says, and when he talked about leadership is not about being in charge. Leadership is about taking care of those in our charge. And so
Yes.
from that perspective, it seems like a lot of things. I mean, like understanding, is someone not going to adapt? Will they adapt slowly? Will they just jump on board and do it? Being able to see what's going on in people's lives, and like you said, the example you gave of, the mother, the single mom with 4 kids, and you're asking her to work, 4 or 5 hours of overtime, creating stress in that environment. Doesn't it all come down from the standpoint of leaders to know your people, engage with your people, so that not only what's going on in their lives and the lives of their families, and you can begin to anticipate and look for some of these things, but also creating that open environment so that rather than having to come into your office and see that Patricia's eyes are just not there, she's just dimmed out, rather than that, having a free environment where you are encouraged to be able to come to me and say, Gary, I'm really struggling right now, and I really need your help to be able to work through this situation. Really, doesn't it come down to how well the leader is really leading and knowing and communicating with his people?
Absolutely. And we know that 75% of the people that leave the workplace, it's because of poor leadership.
Mm.
They leave because, I don't like labeling people bad bosses, but they leave because of the poor behavior and the lack of cluing in to their employees. So yes, an effective leader creates emotionally safe space in the workplace. And what does emotionally safe environment look like? It doesn't have any of the isms in it. Those people that are using sexism, ageism, racism, any of those comments get squashed, right? In meetings. All voices are heard. Emotions are safe to express, not squashed or made fun of or criticized. Why is it important to have an emotionally safe environment? It's because emotions tell us a whole lot more about people's functioning than their thoughts. We can make up all kinds of thoughts. We can say, I'm fine, I'm doing fine. But the body doesn't lie. The body doesn't try to put up a front. If I've got eye twitching going on, if I've got jaw clenching going on, if I'm walking into work and my shoulders are up. So if a leader can say, I've just noticed that, that sparkle in your eye is gone, or I haven't seen you smile for a long time, or I've noticed you're not speaking up at meetings. That noticing is very, very helpful. And then lines such as, if I were you, let's take the single parent mom again. If I were you, as a single parent mom with 4 kids, and this deadline that the team is working on, if I were you, I'd be feeling some extra distress. So you kind of, if I were you, is a very good way to open up that I'm safe for you to share that I'm struggling. Right? It's a wonderful phrase. And the next phrase is, if somebody says something about a feeling or a thought, is to say, tell me more. I want to hear more. The invitation to hear more is very affirming, and again, helps create emotionally safe places. Another piece to use is to check in on your people regularly and say, how are you doing? And add really. Also ask, how are you coping? We've made changes to the system, and we've asked you to adapt and along a very high learning curve. How are you doing at adapting? How are you coping? What are some of the strategies you're using to take care of yourself in the middle of this extra pressure that we put on you?
Wow. Some really, really powerful stuff there. And I think you're right. And I think another thing that goes along with that is so much of the time as leaders, we always think that people are looking to us for answers. I have a problem, I want a solution, when I think many times people just want to be heard. They're not looking for a solution. They just want to be able to get something off their chest, and in being able to do that in itself helps to bring that stress level down, because now they've been heard. So that active listening and making sure, hey, is there anything else that you want to talk about? Tell me more, and dig deeper in those situations until they run out of gas and they say, okay, I've had the opportunity to talk about it. I feel much better now.
Right. I love sharing the 3 questions that Dr. Sidney Simon provided for leaders. And the first one is, share with me what's going well. Second question, share with me what you're struggling with. What are your challenges? And the third question is, how can I be helpful? That's what he used for having supervision, what you call supervision.
But when you take those 3 questions and you put them together, what's the message it delivers? It delivers a message that says, I care about you. It's not just that I care about getting the job done. I care about you as a person and how you're functioning, how you're dealing with this situation. And I think a lot of times people, just knowing that we care deeply about them as individuals, really goes a long way to them opening up and communicating with us. And it creates that emotionally safe space for them to exist where they feel that they can talk about anything, and they can just come in and say, hey, you got 5 minutes. I just need to vent. I just need to get something off my chest that's really bothering me, or I need to share with you something that I'm struggling with.
Right on. The loneliness researcher, Juliana Holt Lundstedt, said, the mere fact of knowing that somebody cares minimizes distress levels. The mere fact of knowing, without that person having to do anything, just knowing that that person cares.
Wow, that is powerful, and it's true. So from that standpoint, then that's a good way to be able to help the people in your organization who are reporting to you, who are relying upon you. It's helping them deal with stress. What do you do when you're on the top of the pile and you don't have anybody to go to be able to to talk to relieve your stress? You have to deal with everybody else's stress. But now, how do you, as a senior leader in the organization, how do you deal with it?
You be the role model of how you want your employees to choose to look after themselves. And I have a little beef with many people who are not using their employee assistance programs. There's a reason they're put in place. And so if you've got an employee assistance program, go for that massage, go see a therapist, go to the gym, use the systems that are put in place for employee wellness. And if the workplace doesn't have a wellness support network or a support umbrella, create one.
Yeah, one of the things that I have found useful over the years, especially being a business owner, and in effect a solopreneur. I mean, I do have some people who do various functions for the organization, but most of the work that I do is by myself. What I have learned to do over the years is to cultivate several critical relationships with other coaches, people who I have come to know and love and trust over the years. And just being able to reach out to them sometimes and say, hey, I'm really struggling with this, or I'm feeling badly, as I approach this particular project. And again, not necessarily looking for someone to solve the problem, just looking for someone to listen to me so that I can get it off my chest. And the thing that's interesting is I find that in probably 60 or 70% of those cases, I find the solutions that I'm looking for just by talking to someone else about it.
That's right. That's right. Oftentimes, if we are natural extroverts, we talk to hear what we think. And so that is the process. And that's lovely that you have peer support. So there's mentorship. You can often find a mentor that's a few steps ahead of you to provide support. Or some people form what they call a mastermind or a support group with 2 or 3 or 4 other people. You don't want a mastermind or support group being too big, but all of those strategies are very, very helpful.
Yeah, I find one of the things that I struggle with personally is being an introvert. You'd never know it to talk to me, but I am an introvert. I would much rather be off by myself. I often joke with people that one of the reasons that I became an engineer was that I hate people, because I was always the type of person that says, hey, give me a problem, stick me in a closet, and 6 weeks later I'll come out with an answer. Don't bother me until I have it. But I realized that if I was going to progress in my career and if I was really going to have an impact on the world, I needed to find ways to extrovert myself. But that brings up an interesting thing when you're dealing with employees and people on your teams. How do you handle and get those people who are introverted to open up? Because a lot of times I think especially if you're severely introverted, it's sort of like the clam in the shell. And when things get difficult, you close up and you just don't want to talk to anybody. And yet everybody around you, if they have, half a brain, can see something is dramatically wrong here. But how do we pry that clamshell open and get them to talk about what's going on so that we can help them through the circumstances that they're in?
Yes. Well, the work of that begins way before the problem that triggers them clamming up. And that is at all meetings and events and gatherings to make sure that you're including them and doing some extra effort. We haven't heard from you, Gary, and your perspectives are always so insightful. What do you think?
Okay.
So that extra effort of doing that for the introvert and with the extrovert saying, well, thank you, George. You always have a lot to contribute. I think it's time we heard from some other people.
Yes. Yeah, because there are those who will try to dominate the meetings for a whole host of reasons. Sometimes they just happen to be very creative people who are bubbling over with ideas, but they can intimidate those people who tend to be more on the quiet side. Yep. And so you're right, getting them to talk about those things. And I like the point that you make, Patricia, is that you cannot wait until you are in the position of having a crisis before you begin to deal with those things. It begins in developing those relationships and in recognizing those people who are going to struggle with these things more and working with them to get them to come out of their shell and participate and be part of the team. Because then, when there is that, if you would excuse my French, or the fecal ventilatory collision, when the crap hits the fan, you're not starting from square one. It doesn't mean that you're not going to face some challenges, but you've at least helped people get far enough down the road where you have that trusting relationship to be able to work with. Right.
One of the really easy strategies around that is to do random appreciation. We know that the employee of the month has lost its power because, they had to choose somebody this month. So for a leader to randomly and strategically make sure that you express appreciation and acknowledge the hard work of all the employees under your watch, and ask yourself, who do I repeatedly miss? That quiet person. I repeatedly have that person sort of at the bottom list. Let's see if I can put that person at the top of my radar to notice and do a rotation. Now, you could even take a piece of paper and write down the employees underneath your watch. And if you're struggling to remember one, that's the person to take out for lunch.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you an interesting story about that I really, really love. You're probably familiar with Zig Ziglar.
Oh, of course.
And he used to do in Dallas, where he lived, he used to do training sessions for people on a variety of subjects. But he told the story about a group of people that he had in. And one of the things that he introduced to them was the concept of, and he actually passed out little Post-it note pads. And on the pad, it says, I like _ because. And he said he was encouraging people to show appreciation to others. And the day after he shared that, there were two couples who went out to dinner together, and they went to one of the nicer restaurants in Dallas. And the waiter who attended them was perfect. He was there whenever he was needed. When he had the ability to anticipate when he was needed. The rest of the time he was in the background. He provided just wonderful service. And so in addition to giving him a very generous tip, each one of them took out their little pad and said, I like because, and along with the little black folder with which they paid him, they put these little notes in. And as they were leaving the restaurant, they had gone out the door, they were walking across the parking lot, and he came out and called to them. And they came back over, and Zig said they relayed the story to him that he was standing there with tears streaming down his face. And he said, I love the work that I do. I love serving people, and I always try to do my best job. But he said, I've been at this restaurant for 17 years. And in 17 years, not one person has ever said, we appreciate you.
Right.
And that's the power of appreciation. And sometimes it can be a little handwritten note. Sometimes it's just, poking your head around somebody's office door and saying, hey, that was great work. I want you to know how much I appreciate you.
Yeah.
That would do more for a lot of people than saying, I'm going to give you a $10,000 raise.
Well, some people will leave an unhappy workplace for less money. They will.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you want to keep your talent. You want to appreciate it. One of the ways to deepen appreciation is to acknowledge what the person did. Thank you for the fine service. The second step is how you feel. I felt attended to and special. And the result, because of your fine service, I'll be coming back to this restaurant again. So let's say it's a leader and expressing appreciation. So thank you, Gary, for getting the report to me on time. I've developed some higher confidence in your ability, and I really like working with you. And getting this report to me makes my life a lot easier because my boss will be on my tail to get this. And now I know I have it.
Yeah.
Right?
And a lot of times you don't know the impact that you have in appreciating people. A number of years ago, when I was in corporate America, I was with a company, and we had been purchased and taken over by another company. And I was the vice president of operations. I reported to the president of the company, and to say that he was not the kind of man I wanted to work for is an understatement. I tended to be very team-based, very team-oriented. He was very autocratic, really didn't care what anybody had to say. But he came to me on a Friday afternoon and said, I need your team in the screw machine department to work over this weekend because we have a critical job that we have to get out. And I said, okay. So I called the fellow who was the supervisor of the department, and he came in, and and I said, Joe, I need you to, if you can, to get your team or get as many on your team as you can to work this weekend, because we really need to get this critical order out. John, who is the president of the company, really needs us to do this. And I said, will you be able to handle that? And he looked at me and he said, no, I won't do it for him.
Wow.
But I'll do it for you.
Oh my goodness.
And I said, why? And he said, because every one of my people out there knows how much you love them. Wow. You're always out there. When you come through the department, you stop and talk to the people. You know who they are. You know their wives. You know their husbands. You know their children. And they know that you care. So yeah, we'll do it for you. But he said, as far as he's concerned, he can go fly a kite. And that to me was the power of saying, and it wasn't anything that I had deliberately done. It was just, hey, this is who I am. This is how I choose to do business, because I like that connection with people. I like being around people. I like knowing who they are. We had 150 people in that plant across 3 shifts, and I knew every one of them. I knew their children. I knew their husbands and wives. I knew what was going on in their lives. And I could use that as an example to develop the managers and the supervisors underneath me to say, hey, I know you're giving this person a hard time, but you know what she's going through?
Yeah.
Her husband's got cancer.
Yeah.
Cut her some slack here, give her some grace.
Yeah.
And those sorts of things. So it's really, really powerful. But really what it comes down to is, as a leader, it's the simple part of it is it's the golden rule. Love people and treat them like you would want to be treated, and really care for them from the heart. And when you do, a lot of the stress issues get taken care of.
Yes. And you accomplished all that with your introverted preference.
Yes. I mean, I think I've become more extroverted over the years. I still, though, I mean, in all honesty, when I get out in a crowd of people, especially if I'm at a speaking event and I'm dealing with a lot of people, at the end of the day, I am drained. And I just say, I need to pull back. I need some private time. I need some space to myself to be able to recharge my batteries, because I don't have an endless supply of that extrovertedness.
Right. Yes. So that's a good point. If you have an introverted preference, the way that you re-energize is time with self. Where if I spend too much time with myself as an extroverted preference, I end up feeling tired and drained. So to have connection with other people energizes me. So it is a difference. And my husband's got quite an extreme introverted preference. And I say he thinks before he thinks what he's going to say, where I talk to hear what I think. Mm-hmm. So we can get into some interesting dynamics. If I say, oh, I wonder what the couch would look like on the other side of the wall, he would be moving it because he would have thought about that for a whole week before he would even say it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Me, I'm just talking to hear my thought. And so he'd get up and he'd start moving the couch, and I'd say, no.
Yeah, my wife and I are very much the same way. She tends to be the type who processes as she talks. And she'll say something to me, and I'll just be sitting there, and she'll say, Did you hear what I said? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, you didn't even grunt or anything like that. And it's like, no, I'm thinking, I'm processing. Right. And she'll say, well, would you do me a favor and try to process out loud?
Well, I know if I ask my hubby a question, I've learned this over the years. I used to get frustrated and say, well, aren't you going to answer me? Now I ask a question. I say, oh, do you need to sleep on it?
Words of wisdom.
And I also say, I'm just talking out loud. I'm wondering. And so over the years, we've learned a fair bit, right? I've been married over 50 years. And so you get to have this sense of the other person's like your second pair of slippers, right? Really comfortable.
Yeah, exactly.
That is if you've worked on your relationship. There's lots of relationships where people are disconnected, particularly after the kids leave home. But if you work on a relationship, and that's true in the home and in the workplace, if you're committed to making that relationship work, you notice aspects of yourself when you relate to that other person, and you start to notice other people's patterns, what triggers them, what lights them up, what their strengths are, what conversations they like. And there's certain words that might trigger one person that doesn't trigger another person. Yeah. So absolutely. You learn this only really through experience and doing lots of mature noticing. Yeah. Exactly.
And with that, I think that's a good place for us to end our conversation today. Patricia, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for your wisdom just in our conversation today. I picked up some nuggets that I'm going to put to use in the work that I do. But as we close today, why don't you just tell everybody how they can connect with you? Because I know there's going to be people in my audience who are going to want to reach out to you.
Google does a really good job. If you put in the word resilience, which I'm known for, and Patricia Morgan, my website is solutionsforresilience.com. But if you don't know how to spell resilience, Google again will probably correct it for you. Patricia Morgan, the word resilience, and the website solutionsforresilience.com.
Very good. Well, thank you again for taking time from your busy schedule to spend some time with me, Patricia. It's been a real joy.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks so much for taking the time to be with me today. If you found this video to be insightful, if you got some little nugget of gold that you can take and put to work in your life right away, will you please hit the like button and also take a moment to share in the comments what you learned from this video today, what you found valuable. Also, if this kind of content resonates with you, if you're interested in learning more about how to live a happy, successful, fulfilled life, hit subscribe, and that way you'll be notified anytime we publish new content. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll see you in the next video.